The locked suite, the lock sealed with a soft mechanical click behind me, not loud, not violent, just final. Suite 412 at Crestview Executive Wellness Retreat looked less like confinement and more like a brochure. Pale sage walls, tasteful abstract art, a neatly made twin bed with hospital-tight corners. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and antiseptic, calm engineered into chemistry. It was marketed as a luxury burnout sanctuary for executives. Legally, it was an involuntary psychiatric hold facility. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my own clothes, minus my shoelaces and phone. They had allowed me dignity, but removed autonomy, a subtle distinction. I didn't pace. I didn't scream. I didn't pound the reinforced door, because panic is evidence, and hysteria is paperwork. 14 hours earlier, my parents had staged what they theatrically called an intervention. In my foyer, they arrived with a private medical transport team and a rehearsed narrative of tears and concern. According to them, I was spiraling, sleep-deprived, unstable, chemically dependent, paranoid. If I had resisted physically, I would have validated their script. So I didn't. I packed a small bag, locked my own front door, and stepped into the transport van with deliberate calm. Because this was never about my mental health. It was about control. I founded Vanguard Logistics, a supply chain optimization firm I built from a 3-person startup into its $60 million valuation over 7 years. Our bylaws contain a clause, Section 12C, founder incapacitation. If the CEO is medically certified as incapacitated, emergency proxy control transfers to designated family stakeholders. Designated family stakeholders. My parents, at 80 Odra M. A nurse handed me a monitored tablet. Executives under observation were permitted 15 minutes to delegate urgent matters. I didn't check email. I logged into my administrative dashboard. Error 423, credentials revoked. Emergency fiduciary proxy initiated. Richard Hale, my father, efficient. I opened the company's internal portal. A memo was pinned at the top. Harper Hale has entered a residential facility to address serious health concerns. Effective immediately, Richard and Eleanor Hale will oversee daily operations. 400 employees, my board, my capital reserves, all under their authority. While I sat in a locked suite, I handed the tablet back without a word. 20 minutes later, I was escorted to the office of the attending psychiatrist, Dr. Julian Mercer. He was sharp-eyed, mid-40s, observant, the kind of clinician accustomed to wealthy executives, either denying collapse or begging for relief. He studied me carefully. "Good morning, Harper," he said in a calibrated tone. "Your parents are deeply concerned. I'm sure they performed that convincingly." I replied evenly. He waited for instability. He found none. "I'm not going to argue my sanity," I continued. "I operate on documentation. Before we discuss my condition, I'd like you to read exactly what they claimed in the intake affidavit." He hesitated. "Collateral reports can be triggering. I won't be triggered." After a long pause, he opened the file. Severe sleep deprivation, erratic mood instability, suspected stimulant misuse, standard boilerplate. "Continue," I said. He moved to the third paragraph. His cadence shifted. Immediate inability to execute fiduciary duties, impaired governance, jeopardized equity distributions. He stopped. He looked up. "That isn't clinical language," he said slowly. "No," I replied. "It's corporate trigger language." Silence settled between us. I leaned forward slightly. "They didn't list symptoms. They listed financial liabilities. This isn't a medical emergency. It's a takeover attempt." Dr. Mercer's expression sharpened. He flipped back through the pages. "That's unusual," he murmured. "The intake proxy is notarized. Check the date." He did. His jaw tightened. The document had been notarized 48 hours before my sudden psychiatric break. "You're suggesting premeditation," he said carefully. "I'm stating arithmetic." He sat back. If he processed this hold without scrutiny, he wasn't just treating a patient. He was facilitating corporate fraud. I can't discharge you immediately, he said finally. Premature release could be interpreted as manic defiance. I don't want immediate discharge, I replied. That caught him off guard. I want comprehensive testing. Full toxicology, cognitive stress evaluation, baseline psychiatric profiling. I want it logged in the state database with timestamps. You want a medical record? He said. I want a weaponized one. He studied me for several seconds. Then he nodded once. Within minutes, blood panels were drawn. Cognitive evaluations began. Memory sequencing, pattern recognition, executive stress modeling. I answered everything with calm precision. No agitation, no deviation, no chemical trace in my blood. At 143 a.m., Dr. Mercer stared at his monitor. Toxicology negative. Metabolic panel optimal. Cognitive function exceptional. He turned to me. There is no medical justification for this hold. He printed the clearance, signed it digitally, stamped it. You are medically sound. I accepted the paper and slid it into my blazer. But we weren't finished. I need a phone, I said. He hesitated only briefly before retrieving an unmonitored device. I called my corporate attorney. He answered on the second ring. Your father invoked proxy control? He said immediately. He's attempting treasury access. How much? 25 million. My pulse remained steady. Freeze attempt. Pending. Good, I said calmly. Pull the metadata from the relinquishment document he submitted. Silence. Then, Harper, the biometric signature is yours. Check GPS coordinates embedded in the signature file. Keyboard clicks. Then a sharp inhale. It was signed in your driveway. Exactly. The document claimed it was executed in my father's Manhattan office. Geographically impossible. And the transport vitals. I asked Dr. Mercer quietly. He checked the intake logs. At 11:15 p.m. your heart rate was 62 bpm, perfect baseline, not the profile of a psychotic collapse. I spoke into the phone again. They harvested my signature from the transport consent waiver and ported it onto a fraudulent corporate surrender. A long pause. Then my attorney's voice sharpened. That's federal. Less. Escalating to the lender's fraud division now? Don't warn them, I said. Let them move. I ended the call. Dr. Mercer watched me differently now. Not as a patient, as a strategist. You're not leaving here panicked, he said quietly. No, I replied. I'm leaving documented. He handed me the final clearance. Outside, the late morning sun felt surgical. My attorney's car was waiting. As I stepped inside, he turned the tablet toward me. The board is in session, he said. And my father? I asked. He's demanding immediate capital transfer. I looked at the building rising ahead, 40 floors of steel and glass that I had built from nothing. Good, I said softly. Because in exactly 12 minutes, I was going to walk into that boardroom, and they still believed I was locked in a psychiatric ward. But what my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the federal fraud alert had already been triggered. And by the time I stepped into my own boardroom, men in tactical vests were entering the lobby downstairs. The boardroom coup. The elevator ride to the 40th floor lasted 14 seconds. Long enough to breathe, long enough to prepare, not long enough to forgive. When the doors opened, the executive suit felt different, charged. Conversations died mid-sentence as I stepped onto the thick gray carpet. Assistants froze. Analysts stared. Someone dropped a pen. According to the company memo, I was in psychiatric crisis. According to my blood work, I was biologically flawless. And according to the federal banking system, my father was about to have a very bad morning. My mother stood near the administrative bullpen, rifling through folders with theatrical authority. She wore a cream designer suit and the expression of someone already redecorating my corner office in her mind. She turned. The color drained from her face so quickly it was almost clinical. The folder slipped from her fingers. Harper, she whispered. I didn't slow down. I didn't acknowledge her. I walked straight to the frosted glass doors of the primary boardroom and pushed them open. Silence detonated inside. My father stood at the head of the long mahogany table, sleeves slightly rolled, leaning over a projected spreadsheet. He was mid-sentence, something about temporary stewardship and fiduciary necessity. He looked up. For a moment, he simply stared, like a man seeing a ghost. "You're supposed to be under observation," he said finally, voice thin at the edges. "You're unwell." I stepped fully into the room. "I'm medically cleared," I replied calmly. I placed the signed psychiatric evaluation in the center of the table. The official state seal caught the overhead light. My CFO, Marcus, grabbed it first. His eyes scanned rapidly. "Toxicology negative," he read. "Cognitive assessment, exceptional. No psychiatric findings." A murmur rippled across the board. My father recovered quickly. He always did. "This is irrelevant," he snapped. "She voluntarily signed a relinquishment of corporate duties last night. The proxy is legally binding." He held up the document bearing my biometric signature. The room felt like it was narrowing. I crossed my arms. "Read the execution line," I said. Marcus adjusted his glasses. "Signed at Hale Commercial Holdings, Manhattan." "Now," I continued, "check the embedded metadata attached to the digital signature." My attorney, standing near the wall, connected his tablet to the boardroom display. Within seconds, the GPS coordinates appeared on screen. A blinking red dot. My home address. Not Manhattan. Not my father's office. My driveway. A heavy stillness filled the room. My father's jaw tightened. "That proves nothing," he said. "Digital systems glitch." "Do medical transport systems glitch too?" I asked quietly. I slid another document across the table. Time-stamped vitals from the transport team. 11:15 p.m. Marcus Reed. Heart rate 62 bpm. Blood pressure optimal? I looked directly at my father. If I was experiencing a catastrophic psychotic break severe enough to surrender a company, I said evenly, my vitals would reflect distress. They don't. My mother's breathing grew audible near the door. "You're twisting this," she said sharply. "We were protecting you." "No," I corrected. "You were attempting to liquidate 25 million. That number landed heavily. My father slammed his palm against the table. "We were safeguarding liquidity during executive instability." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus spoke carefully. "Richard, the Treasury Vault requires Harper's leave biometric authentication or a valid court order. I have her signature." My father barked. "And we have proof it was harvested from a medical waiver." My attorney replied coolly. "The lender's fraud division has already flagged the transaction attempt." That got his attention. My father's confidence flickered just briefly. "What lender?" he asked. "The primary one," I answered. "And they've placed a hard freeze on all Treasury movement pending federal review." My mother inhaled sharply. "You reported us," she whispered. "I reported forged biometric identity theft," I replied. Before anyone could respond, the boardroom doors opened again, not gently this time. 4 figures stepped inside, 2 uniformed officers and 2 plainclothes detectives wearing financial crimes insignia. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father straightened instinctively. "Officers," he said smoothly, shifting tone like a practiced politician. "This is a private corporate matter." The lead detective ignored him and addressed my attorney instead. "Financial Crimes Task Force. We received a high-priority fraud escalation tied to this company." My attorney nodded. "Correct." The detective turned to my father. "Did you submit a notarized document attempting to authorize a 25 million transfer?" "Yes," my father replied quickly. "Is acting fiduciary proxy?" While the CEO was confined under medical hold, the detective asked, "Les, and are you aware that the embedded metadata in that document places the biometric signing device at a different location than the execution site listed?" Silence. My father's mouth opened, then closed. My mother stepped forward. "This is outrageous," she said, voice trembling. We were trying to save her from herself. The detective's expression didn't change. Mom, misrepresenting a medical emergency to obtain corporate control, and attempting interstate capital transfer under falsified execution credentials constitutes felony fraud. The word felony seemed to echo. My father's composure cracked. You don't understand who I am, he said quietly. Oh, we do, the detective replied. The metallic click of handcuffs sounded unnaturally loud in the room. My mother gasped. This is a misunderstanding, she cried. It's documented, I said calmly, and documentation always wins. The officers escorted them toward the elevator. Employees watched from the hallway, stunned, whispering. My father didn't look at me as he passed, not once. When the doors closed behind them, the boardroom felt enormous. Marcus exhaled slowly. The proxy is void, he said. Treasury secure. Operational control restored. I took my seat at the head of the table. No applause, no theatrics, just gravity settling back into place. Resume the agenda, I said. But as laptops reopened and voices cautiously restarted, my attorney's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression shifted. There's something else, he said quietly. What? I asked. He hesitated. The fraud unit is expanding the investigation. On what grounds? He looked up at me. Because someone else accessed your corporate credentials 3 weeks ago. The room stilled again. 3 weeks ago. Before the intervention. Before the proxy. Before any of this. Which meant this wasn't spontaneous. It was staged. Long before they showed up at my door. If my parents had been inside my systems weeks earlier, then the psychiatric hold was never the beginning. It was the final move. And I was about to find out how deep the breach really went. The breach beneath the coup, 3 weeks earlier. That's what my attorney had said. Someone accessed my corporate credentials 3 weeks earlier. Not during the intervention? Not during the forged proxy. Before any of it. Which meant the psychiatric hold wasn't the beginning of the plan. It was the extraction phase. We cleared the boardroom. Only Marcus, my attorney Daniel Reeves, and I remained. The glass walls that once symbolized transparency now felt like aquarium panels, exposed, watchful. Pull the access logs, I said. Marcus connected his laptop to the main display. Vanguard's security dashboard illuminated the wall, timestamped entries, IP addresses, device authentications. There, Daniel said quietly. A login under my master credentials. Timestamped 14 a.m., 19 days ago. That wasn't me, I said calmly. Marcus nodded. We flagged it as remote administrative testing. The system authenticated through your biometric key. My biometric key never leaves my possession. The room went silent, because that wasn't entirely true. 3 weeks ago, I attended a private investor summit hosted by my father's commercial development firm. A charity event, black tie, press coverage, handshakes and champagne. At the entrance, guests checked in digitally, thumb verification for secure access badges. I closed my eyes briefly. They hadn't forged my signature first. They cloned my biometric imprint. Can you trace the IP? I asked. Marcus zoomed in. Internal reroute through a private VPN node, he said. But the originating hardware signature matches a device registered under Hale Commercial Holdings. Daniel swore under his breath. This wasn't opportunistic, he said. They ceded access weeks before invoking the proxy. I leaned back slowly. They were mapping treasury pathways. Marcus nodded. The first unauthorized login accessed vendor payment architecture and secondary authorization protocols. No money moved. It was reconnaissance. Reconnaissance. My own parents had conducted a digital reconnaissance mission inside my company. Why wait 3 weeks? Marcus asked. Because hostile takeovers require timing. I replied, you don't seize control until you can eliminate resistance, and resistance, in this case, was me. Daniel stepped closer to the display. There's more, he said. Another login. 2 days before the intervention, File accessed executive succession contingency. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from precision. They were checking fallback clauses. I murmured. If proxy control failed, what alternative levers existed? Marcus looked uneasy now. There's one more anomaly. He opened a separate log, encrypted communication pings between internal systems and an external cloud archive. What is that? I asked. Someone copied fragments of your private board correspondence, he said. Selective extraction. Nothing operational. Just context. Understanding washed over me. They were building narrative scaffolding. Daniel frowned. Meaning, they needed supporting evidence to justify the psychiatric affidavit. Emails taken out of context. Strategic disagreements reframed as instability. Marcus exhaled slowly. This was a reputational assassination layered over financial fraud. Yes, I said. And we only stopped the financial layer? Daniel looked at me sharply. What do you mean? They failed to move the 25 million, I continued. But the narrative is still circulating. Investors received the intervention memo. Employees saw the proxy activation. Doubt was seeded. Silence. He was right. Fraud is visible, doubt is viral, and doubt lingers. Daniel's phone buzzed again. He glanced down. It's the lender's fraud division, he said. They've escalated to federal prosecutors. On the forged proxy? Marcus asked. Yes. But there's an additional charge under review. What? Daniel looked at me carefully. Conspiracy to commit corporate destabilization? That was new and dangerous. Because destabilization isn't just about theft. It's about erosion of value. If prosecutors frame this as market manipulation, Marcus said slowly, or valuation could take a hit. Exactly. Even if we won legally, volatility could cost us millions. They wanted me declared unstable publicly. I said quietly, so even if I returned, investor confidence would fracture. Daniel nodded. Stock perception drives leverage. And leverage drives survival. I finished. Marcus closed his laptop halfway. There's something else we need to consider. I waited. Your parents didn't act alone. The air shifted. Explain. I said. The system access required layered authentication overrides. He continued. Even with cloned biometrics, someone internally had to suppress anomaly alerts. Internal, not just family betrayal. Corporate infiltration. Daniel's jaw tightened. You think someone on staff assisted? Marcus hesitated. I'm saying security suppression doesn't happen accidentally. The room felt colder now. Because betrayal from blood is calculable. Betrayal from within is systemic. Who had override clearance? I asked. Marcus opened another directory. 4 people. He turned the screen toward us. Myself, Marcus, Chief Technology Officer, Adrian Cole, and Director of Infrastructure, Leela Grant. Adrian had been with me since year 2. Brilliant, quiet, indispensable. Leela managed cybersecurity architecture, both loyal, or so I believed. Daniel folded his arms. If this expands into corporate conspiracy, we need airtight clarity before prosecutors start asking questions. Agreed, I said. Marcus looked hesitant. There's a final data point. I nodded. The VPN node used during the unauthorized login rerouted through an offshore relay, but the payment for that relay service was made using corporate card credentials. My chest went still. Whose card? Daniel asked. Marcus swallowed. It was assigned to the CTO's discretionary technology budget. Adrian. The room held its breath. Call him, I said. Marcus dialed. Straight to voicemail. Again, voicemail. Daniel's eyes met mine. When was the last confirmed physical sighting of Adrian? He asked. Marcus checked his calendar. He left early yesterday. Said he had a migraine. Yesterday, the same morning my parents tried to liquidate Treasury. That's not coincidence. Daniel murmured. No, it wasn't. I stood slowly. Lock down all system privileges, I ordered. Revoke Adrian's credentials. Freeze his access. Audit every device registered under his ID. Marcus moved instantly. Daniel was already drafting escalation notices. But as the system processed the credential revocation, an alert flashed red across the screen. Uniteratus, Theros, Ogras S, Source CTO Administrative Console, Destination External Encrypted Server. My pulse remained steady, but the game had just changed, because while we were celebrating stopping a coup, someone inside my company was actively extracting data. Right now, if Adrian was behind this, then my parents were only the surface layer, and whatever he was transferring in this exact moment could destroy Vanguard in ways far worse than a stolen 25 million. The architect of the breach, the red alert pulsed like a heartbeat across the boardroom screen. UNRZR dat a Sfresser Einaugress. Source CTO Administrative Console, Destination Encrypted Offshore Server. Marcus's fingers were already flying across his keyboard. I'm attempting a forced termination, he said, but he's running it through layered encryption. He anticipated revocation. Of course he did, because this wasn't panic. This was contingency. Isolate the node, I said calmly. I'm trying. He embedded a fail-safe. If we hard kill the transfer, it fragments and auto-deploys. Daniel looked up sharply. Deploys where? Marcus swallowed. Public blockchain archive. Meaning irreversible. Meaning permanent. Meaning catastrophic. Adrian wasn't stealing money. He was stealing leverage. What file cluster is transferring? I asked. Marcus zoomed in. Board communications. Investor term sheets. Pending acquisition documents. Confidential expansion models. If released publicly, it wouldn't just embarrass us. It would destabilize market confidence overnight. He's not trying to profit, Daniel murmured. He's trying to burn the building down. I replied. Marcus glanced at me. There's one way to interrupt the encryption cascade. Do it. I need your master biometric authentication. I stepped forward without hesitation, thumb to scanner, retina verification, dual authorization accepted. The screen shifted. Manual system override unlocked. Now, Marcus whispered. He executed a targeted quarantine, not a kill switch, but a reroute. Instead of terminating the transfer, he redirected the outgoing data stream into an internal sandbox server, one that mimicked successful external transmission. To Adrian, it would appear complete. To us, it would be contained. The red pulse stopped. Silence. Then transfer compie. Marcus exhaled shakily. He thinks it went through? Daniel looked at me. You just stopped corporate detonation? No, I said quietly. I postponed it. Because Adrian was still out there? And cornered architects do desperate things. As if summoned by consequence, the boardroom doors opened. Adrian Cole stepped inside. He didn't look panicked. He looked resigned. You're faster than I expected, he said evenly. Marcus stood abruptly. You breached internal security. Adrian shrugged faintly. Security is architecture. I built it. Daniel moved closer to me. Why? He asked sharply. Adrian's eyes settled on me. You don't see it, do you? He said softly. See what? I replied. You built a fortress? He continued. And then surrounded yourself with sharks. Investors pressuring growth at unsustainable velocity. Competitors circling. Your parents saw weakness. I saw inevitability. You saw opportunity. I corrected. He didn't deny it. They approached me after the investor summit, he said calmly. Your father wanted insight into system redundancies. He implied long-term restructuring. Restructuring? Marcus snapped. Adrian looked at him coolly. Harper drives expansion like war strategy. Brilliant but volatile. The board whispers about risk tolerance. I was offered stability. Stability. That's what betrayal always calls itself. You cloned my biometric imprint at the summit check-in, I said. Less. And ceded system access 3 weeks ago? Less. And when the proxy failed, you triggered data extraction. A pause. Yes? Daniel's voice hardened. You committed corporate espionage and conspiracy. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. No, he said quietly. I executed contingency. For who? I asked. He finally hesitated. And in that hesitation, truth surfaced. For the incoming investors, he admitted. Marcus frowned. What incoming investors? Adrian gave a hollow smile. The ones your parents were negotiating with. The room went still. They weren't just liquidating treasury. I realized. They were positioning acquisition. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. A forced undervaluation, he said. Stage instability. Crash confidence. Trigger acquisition at discount. Adrian nodded. You would have been removed within 6 months anyway, he said to me. This just accelerated inevitability. I felt something then, not anger, clarity. You underestimated one thing, I said quietly. And what's that? I don't collapse under pressure. He studied me. I know. Outside the glass walls, employees were beginning to notice tension again. Security personnel approached discreetly. Daniel stepped forward. This conversation is now documented under legal counsel, he said firmly. Anything further you say? Adrian raised a hand. I know my rights. Security entered. Adrian didn't resist. As they escorted him toward the elevator, he stopped briefly and looked back at me. You built something extraordinary, he said. But extraordinary things attract predators. The doors closed behind him. Silence lingered. Marcus sat slowly. So what now? He asked. I looked at the screen, at the contained data transfer sitting safely in quarantine. Now, I said, we reverse the narrative. Daniel nodded slightly. You're thinking proactive disclosure. Les, instead of hiding the attempted breach, we would announce it. Transparency. Attempted fraudulent takeover thwarted. Internal security compromise neutralized. Federal investigation ongoing. Treasury secure. Operations uninterrupted. Confidence restored through strength. Marcus hesitated. Investors will panic only if we look shaken, I replied. Within hours, a controlled press statement was drafted. By evening, regulators were notified voluntarily. By morning, industry media ran headlines not about instability, but about resilience. Shares didn't drop, they stabilized. Because markets fear secrecy more than crisis. 3 weeks later, the fallout finalized. My parents were indicted on multiple felony counts: biometric identity theft, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, unlawful confinement. Adrian cooperated partially in exchange for reduced sentencing, confirming acquisition negotiations were already underway before the intervention. The acquisition firm withdrew immediately, and Vanguard's valuation, it climbed. Because survival under attack proves structural integrity, I stood alone one evening in the same boardroom where the coup had nearly succeeded. Glass walls, city lights, 40 floors above ground. I had lost something irreversible. Not just family, not just trust, illusion. But illusion is expensive, truth is efficient. Marcus stepped inside quietly. Federal prosecutors want your formal testimony next week, he said. I nodded. Schedule it. He hesitated. You ever think about walking away? He asked. I looked out at the skyline. No, I said calmly. Why? Because this company wasn't almost stolen due to weakness. I turned back toward the table. It was targeted because it's powerful. Marcus gave a small nod and left. I remained standing there for several minutes, until my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. A woman's voice spoke calmly. You don't know me, Harper. But we were one of the acquisition firms your parents were negotiating with. My expression didn't change. And? I asked. They weren't the only ones. A pause. There are others who still believe Vanguard would be more valuable without you at the helm. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. Predators. Adrian was right about one thing. Extraordinary things attract them. And this wasn't over. If powerful investors were already circling before the coup, then my parents were never the true endgame. They were just the opening move. The final move. Predators prefer wounded prey. But what they fear, is prey that fights back publicly. 48 hours after the anonymous call, Daniel traced the number through private exchange routing. It led nowhere actionable, intentionally masked. But the message itself was clear. My parents were not the architects. They were leverage. Someone bigger had been watching Vanguard long before the intervention. My removal was not personal revenge. It was strategic acquisition. We convened a restricted strategy session, just Marcus, Daniel, and me. No assistants, no remote access. Devices shielded. If acquisition firms were in preliminary talks, Marcus said carefully, we need to know who had access to valuation modeling. Adrian, I replied. And through him, anyone he briefed. Daniel opened a secure file. We pulled archived communications from Adrian's workstation. He said, there's one encrypted exchange we couldn't fully decrypt before. Before what? Before he retained independent counsel and invoked privilege. I folded my hands. What do we know? Daniel rotated the screen. A meeting entry. Private dinner. Location. The Marlowe Club. Attendees Adrian Cole. Richard Hale. Representative. Calder Strategic Holdings. Calder Strategic Holdings. The name settled heavily. They're aggressive. Marcus muttered. Specialize in distressed acquisitions. Distressed. The word tasted deliberate. They weren't planning partnership. I said quietly. They were planning compression. Stage instability. Crash valuation. Acquire at discount. Replace leadership. A surgical corporate suffocation. They underestimated something. Daniel said. What? Marcus asked. That you'd survive the initial strike. I stood and walked toward the glass wall overlooking the skyline. No, I said softly. They calculated I wouldn't. Silence lingered. Which means, I continued, they still believe I'm vulnerable. Marcus frowned. We just stabilized public confidence? Yes. Publicly? I turned back toward them. But privately? They assume internal fracture. Legal distraction. Executive fatigue. Daniel's eyes sharpened. You're proposing counteroffensive. Yes. Predators stalk in shadow, but exposure disrupts leverage. Schedule an investor summit. I said. Live, transparent, global stream. Marcus blinked. You want to invite the sharks into the water. I want them visible. Daniel nodded slowly. And what's the objective? Announce expansion. Marcus stared at me. In the middle of federal litigation. Especially now. Expansion isn't weakness. Expansion is defiance. Within a week, Vanguard announced a strategic initiative: international supply chain AI integration across 3 new markets. We revealed secured partnerships already in advanced negotiation, legitimate ones. Not Calder. The announcement stunned the market. Instead of retreating post-crisis, we advanced. Shares rose, confidence surged, and Calder. They requested a private meeting. I agreed. The Marlowe Club was understated luxury, old wood, quiet lighting, soundproofed booths. The same place Adrian had met them. I arrived alone. 3 representatives waited, polished, controlled, smiling with practiced neutrality. The lead partner, James Calder himself, extended a hand. Hale, he said smoothly. Resilient performance. I didn't sit immediately. You attempted acquisition through destabilization. I said evenly. A faint smile. That's an interpretation. It's documentation. He leaned back. Your company is valuable, he said calmly. But leadership volatility creates opportunity. Volatility, I asked. Your parents' indictment. Your CTO's arrest. Federal investigations. He paused. Investors crave predictability, and you believe replacing me provides that. It would provide confidence. I finally sat. Confidence, I repeated quietly, comes from growth metrics. I slid a folder across the table. Inside projected revenue from the expansion initiative, signed memorandums of understanding, early adoption contracts. Calder skimmed them. His expression shifted subtly. You secured these after the breach, he asked. Les, you moved quickly. I moved decisively. Silence stretched. You're still exposed, he said after a moment. Federal proceedings drag on. Market memory lingers. Yes, I agreed. And yet, I added calmly, if any acquisition attempt surfaces during an active federal fraud investigation tied to your preliminary negotiations. His jaw tightened slightly. It becomes discoverable, I finished. There it was, exposure. Predators fear daylight. He closed the folder slowly. You're suggesting mutually assured destruction? He said quietly. I'm suggesting partnership. That caught him off guard. Explain. You attempted entry through fracture? I continued. You miscalculated leadership stability. But your capital and our expansion align strategically. Marcus would have called it bold. Daniel would have called it dangerous. But I called it inevitable. You want equity? I asked. Buy-in at market value. Calder studied me for a long time. You're not interested in exit, he said. No. You're interested in dominance. Yes. A faint smile curved his mouth. You're more dangerous than your parents described. I'm more prepared. Another silence. Then finally, we'll review the expansion projections, he said. No hostile action? For now? I asked. For now? It wasn't trust. It was recalibration. As I left the club that night, I understood something clearly. My parents had been reckless. Adrian had been ambitious. But Calder was patient. Corporate war rarely ends. It evolves. 3 months later, Vanguard closed its first international expansion deal. Revenue projections exceeded forecast by 12%. Federal prosecutors secured indictments against my parents and Adrian. Calder's Strategic Holdings purchased a minority stake, at full valuation, on my terms. Late one evening, I returned to Suite 412 at Crestview Executive Wellness. Not as a patient, as a visitor. Mercer greeted me with quiet recognition. You didn't come back for therapy, he said. No, I replied. I stood in the doorway of the same room that had once been my cage. Locks, sage walls, still immaculate. They tried to use this place to erase me, I said softly. And, he asked. I looked around once more. They underestimated documentation. He nodded faintly. As I left, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, a text this time. You won this round. No signature, no name. I didn't respond. Because corporate war isn't about winning rounds. It's about surviving long enough to write the rules. And now, I was writing them. If someone tried to remove you not through force, but through reputation, legality, and strategy, would you fight quietly? Or would you make your defense impossible to ignore?